Well, good evening. How's that? Still muted. How's that? That's better. Well, yes, good evening. At least a few of you showed up. I must be wearing the wrong aftershave because nobody wants to sit in the front. That's okay. That's all right. Some really good news for you. This is the last ITEC 841 lecture delivered by me. So you'll have Stephen next week. Stephen Smith. Dr. Stephen Smith. Not the Dr. Smith from Lost in Space. I started marking your assignment, and I should within the next week be able to return it to you. As I won't be talking to you next week, I'll give you a little bit of feedback now and ask any questions you might have. So in terms of feedback, the MS project exercise was very straightforward. Some of you didn't understand the cash flow in the specific weeks, even though our friend here asked a lot of questions about that and was covered on the forum endlessly. And there's lots of reports, and some of you would just copy a graph from MS Project without giving me the number. So that wasn't very good. So some of you just struggled with the question about cash flows. As well, a lot of you struggled with question 8. And of course, if you had said you need 4 programmers and 5 designers, well, clearly that's the maximum number of resources you need, isn't it? It has to correlate to question 1. How could you have a different answer to question 1? It's not logical. And in what weeks they occur, there's many reports that show that. Show the allocation of resources, and so you can pick that off report. So the assignment did require you to do a bit of analysis, but it wasn't. I think it's very straightforward. So the second half was designed to be a bit more challenging. So in terms of the risks, most of you struggled with understanding what the source of the risk is, and the source is really the stakeholder. It could be an information system like HL7 compliance. Lack of HL7 compliance, the source would be the feeder, as in the case study talk about feeder systems. So it would be feeder systems. Thank you. As the source. So a lot of you didn't understand what was meant by source, but we really do want to know where the risk comes from. For instance, another source of risk would be doctors. What risk would the doctors give us? Yeah, a lot of you said that. Why would they put wrong information? And remember, too, that this is a machine-to-machine integration, and so the information would come from their feeder systems, from their prescribing systems. So that wouldn't be a significant risk that they would purposely put in wrong information to sabotage the system, because it would be traceable to the doctor involved. They would get into a lot of trouble. And the doctors don't think that way. They think in terms of doing the best for their patients with the minimum amount of effort, as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, lack of compliance. And so compliance requires setting up the original patient profile. And there's a Medicare rebate for that. So that's the treatment as well, is to reimburse them for their time or give them an assistant for their time. A lot of you had that as a treatment, which is a good treatment. A lot of you were quite superficial. For instance, if the risk is a lack of HL7 compliance, it's make the systems HL7 compliant. Right, you've got a magic wand? Watching Harry Potter? Magic wand? Is this going to happen? No. So you have to de-scope. Change the scope of the project, in fact. You can't bend... Steve Jobs, we'll talk about leadership in a minute, and Steve Jobs, one of his mottos was bend reality. You're not Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was able to bend reality. He did it, for instance, when the record companies, the record labels, were selling albums. Originally it was on vinyl. I know, you weren't born, but vinyl was making a comeback, by the way. But then it was the compact disc, the CD. And the CD actually followed the format of the original vinyl, because on vinyl, to get about 40 minutes, 50 minutes of music, you needed two sides, an A side and a B side. The A side would have the hits that you'd bought the record for. What would the B side have? Well, lots of other stuff that wasn't as popular. And you had to pay, and I don't know, with CDs it was like $30 if you like, for a CD, where really you're only interested in, you know, a few of the songs. You had to buy the whole CD. So Steve Jobs changed the whole paradigm. He convinced the record labels to allow him to sell single tracks on iTunes for 99 cents US. And his bargaining, his leverage he used was, if you don't do this, you're just encouraging the Napster, it was Napster at the time, but we still do peer-to-peer sharing. We still torrent, we still download music illegally, and that was a way for record companies to reduce the illegality and to differentiate their market so they could maybe go after those who are illegally sharing as well. When everybody's doing it, you can't go after everybody. It's just too difficult. So he bent reality, he changed reality. Same thing when he launched the iPhone. The original iPhone was the iPhone 3. It started with 3 because of 3G. And for the iPhone 3, it had glass. It was really a beautiful product. You know, the way it would sit in your hand, and it had a curved back, and it was made out of glass. And when he talked to Crown Corning, the very big US glass manufacturer, about how much glass he's going to need, they said, no, we can't do that. It was Gorilla Glass they had invented, a very tough glass. I don't think it's tough enough, in fact. That should be a good innovation. We should have unbreakable screens. Why don't they do that? That would be innovative. Because so many of students have got cracked screens because they are either clumsy or the inevitable happens, they crack it, but then they can't afford to have it fixed. I dropped mine on the concrete, I remember once, and I found a mobile shop and I threw it at the guy and said, fix it and give me a new protector and give me a good protector, and how long do you need? Yeah, I'll be back. Had it fixed the same day. Too embarrassing to walk around with a cracked screen, you know, and the wife in particular asked, what, you cracked your phone? See, nobody knows. Anyway, that's how he bent reality, right? He got Crown Corning, he convinced them to supply him the Gorilla Glass. So you in your risk management can't, you're not Steve Jobs, you can't bend reality. And so if the systems are not compliant, you have to de-scope the project. So most of you did a fair job, but I've identified the major risks that I was looking for, in fact. So you can see a list I'm giving you. Just hover over the blue icons, and that gives you the feedback. And as the assignment got progressively more difficult, a lot of you tried to search the internet for what are the limitations with MS Project. And you're trying to give me technical issues like usability and collaboration. In fact, Microsoft Project can easily be administered through a client-server architecture so that your whole team can see the Gantt charts. And how would they do their timesheets otherwise anyway for tracking Gantt? It's designed with a collaborative function, so that's not a good answer. And the real issue was that for a complex IT project, you should consider an agile methodology. An agile methodology comes with a high-level, top-down, coarse-grained plan And certainly you can do that in MS Project. You just take the major phases, the inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. If you're using RUP, for instance, those are going to be my 4 phases. And approximately, compared to similar projects, or what we guess, is this what might be the cost, and this might be the time, and these might be the type of resources we need. Very coarse grain, very high level. You can put that in or do it at the back of an envelope. It doesn't much matter how you do it. That's fine. But each agile methodology has this loop. This loop is called an iteration. And this is where you need MS Project. It is a waterfall, but it's time-boxed. That's the key. And that time-boxing concept is both common in DSDM and in RUP. You see that, and that's how we control risk. We let the team go for 2 to 6 weeks, depending on how big the project is. The bigger the project, the longer the iteration usually, because there's more work that they have to do, and the bigger the team too. But that's a waterfall. That's a mini project. And so you need people to do tasks. And in Agile, what we want is people to wear multiple hats. We want a lot of versatility, because depending on the iteration, it depends what they're going to be doing. But we do some design, we do some requirements, we do elicitation, we do some design, we do some coding, some testing, and some integration. We saw that in RUP. Those diagrams showing the Royce's waterfall, mini waterfalls. A mini waterfall is exactly right for MS Project. It's only at the stage gate, at the end of the iteration, where we scratch our head and go, did we deliver what we wanted or not? We do an evaluation. And based on that evaluation, we plan the next iteration, which is then planned in MS Project. And we don't have this ever-changing baseline. That's the problem with the baseline. Some of you said it's a limitation with MS Project. It will only hold 11 baselines. Why would you simultaneously want to track against 11 baselines? Yeah, that's a stupidity. That's how bureaucratic. What was the version 1, version 2, version 3? Up to version 11 it will hold. Unbelievable. What really ends up happening is you change. You change the project, you adjust the project continuously, and that's the huge limitation. In a complex project, the project manager constantly having to update the project plan, the Gantt chart, the resource allocation, drive everybody crazy. You know how I wanted you in 3 weeks' time for 2 weeks? Now I need you in 4 weeks' time for 3 weeks, and every time changing. There's no consistency, because it's a moving target, whereas it can be used for an iteration. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Does it make sense? Why didn't any of you come up with that as the answer? So my assignments tend to be somewhat formative, because you have a summative assessment, and that is the exam. So the exam focuses on key issues, tries to be fairly key, but sometimes a bit obscure too, to give some variety and challenge, has a range of questions. But the assignments I'm trying to be somewhat formative. So after making you use MS Project, think about risk and think about iteration, and then you see the limitation too. Yeah? Got any questions on the first assignment? So you'll get my feedback, and the more difficult the section, the more lenient I tend to be. You would have seen that with iTech 832. A lot of you made a mess of the 2B process and got some of your metrics wrong, but I sort of rewarded the effort. Good. Okay. Let's talk about... we have only got a few topics tonight. Should be quite an easy night, not very technical, just leadership and team management. So just to celebrate my last lecture with you guys, we'll have a bit of fun with it. Yes? Woohoo. I'm in a good mood anyway. So leadership is very important. And this comes from Larson, chapter 10. And Steve Jobs is one of the most interesting leaders we've come across in contemporary IT history. He's quite unique. So first of all, let's look at, we love videos, don't we? Yes, I like videos. Videos are good. Give you a break from me. None of you ever watch YouTube, do you? Have you heard of YouTube? No? Well, I'll introduce YouTube to you. There are a lot of cats on YouTube. And they don't have an ad blocker because...
There's a man by the name of Captain William Swenson who recently was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions on September 8th, 2009. On that day, a column of American and Afghan troops were making their way through a part of Afghanistan to help protect a group of government officials, a group of Afghan government officials who'd be meeting with some local village elders. The column came under ambush and was surrounded on 3 sides. And amongst many other things, Captain Swenson was recognized for running into live fire to rescue the wounded and pull out the dead. One of the people he rescued was a sergeant, and he and a comrade were making their way to a medevac helicopter. And what was remarkable about this day is, by sheer coincidence, one of the medevac medics happened to have a GoPro camera on his helmet and captured the whole scene on camera. It shows Captain Swenson and his comrade bringing this wounded soldier who'd received a gunshot to the neck. They put him in the helicopter, and then you see Captain Swenson bend over and give him a kiss before he turns around to rescue more. I saw this, and I thought to myself, where do people like that come from? What is that? That is some deep, deep emotion when you would want to do that. There's a love there. And I want to know, why is it that I don't have people that I work with like that? You know, in the military, they give medals to people who are willing to sacrifice themselves so that others may gain. In business, we give bonuses to people who are willing to sacrifice others so that we may gain. Right? So I asked myself, where do people like this come from? And my initial conclusion was that they're just better people. That's why they're attracted to the military. These better people are attracted to this concept of service. But that's completely wrong. What I learned is that it's the environment. And if you get the environment right, every single one of us has the capacity to do these remarkable things. And more importantly, others have that capacity too. I've had the great honor of getting to meet some of these who we would call heroes, who've put themselves and put their lives at risk to save others. And I asked them, why would you do it? Why did you do it? And they all say the same thing, because they would have done it for me. It's this deep sense of trust and cooperation. So trust and cooperation are really important here. The problem with concepts of trust and cooperation is that they are feelings. They're not instructions. I can't simply say to you, trust me, and you will. I can't simply instruct 2 people to cooperate, and they will. It's not how it works. It's a feeling. So where does that feeling come from? If you go back 50,000 years to the Paleolithic era, to the early days of Homo sapien, what we find is that the world was filled with danger. All of these forces working very, very hard to kill us. Nothing personal. Whether it was the weather, lack of resources, maybe a saber-toothed tiger, all of these things working to reduce our lifespan. And so we evolved into social animals, where we lived together and worked together in what I call a circle of safety, inside the tribe, where we felt like we belonged. And when we felt safe amongst our own, the natural reaction was trust and cooperation. There are inherent benefits to this. It means I can fall asleep at night and trust that someone from within my tribe will watch for danger. If we don't trust each other, if I don't trust you, that means you won't watch for danger. Bad system of survival. The modern day is exactly the same thing. The world is filled with danger, things that are trying to frustrate our lives or reduce our success, reduce our opportunity for success. It could be the ups and downs of an economy, the uncertainty of the stock market. It could be a new technology that renders your business model obsolete overnight. Or it could be your competition that is sometimes trying to kill you. It's sometimes trying to put you out of business, but at the very minimum is working hard to frustrate your growth and steal your business from you. We have no control over these forces. These are a constant and they're not going away. The only variable are the conditions inside the organization. And that's where leadership matters, because it's the leader that sets the tone. When a leader makes the choice to put the safety and lives of the people inside the organization first, to sacrifice their comforts and sacrifice the tangible results so that the people remain and feel safe and feel like they belong, remarkable things happen. I was flying on a trip, and I was witness to an incident where a passenger attempted to board before their number was called. And I watched the gate agent treat this man like he had broken the law, like a criminal. He was yelled at for attempting to board one group too soon. So I said something. I said, why do you have to treat us like cattle? Why can't you treat us like human beings? And this is exactly what she said to me. She said, "Sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job." All she was telling me is that she doesn't feel safe. All she was telling me is that she doesn't trust her leaders. The reason we like flying Southwest Airlines is not because they necessarily hire better people, it's because they don't fear their leaders. You see, if the conditions are wrong, we're forced to expend our own time and energy to protect ourselves from each other. And that inherently weakens the organization. When we feel safe inside the organization, we will naturally combine our talents and our strengths and work tirelessly to face the dangers outside and seize the opportunities. The closest analogy I can give to what a great leader is like being a parent. If you think about what being a great parent is, what do you want? What makes a great parent? We want to give our child opportunities, education, discipline them when necessary, all so that they can grow up and achieve more than we could for ourselves. Great leaders want exactly the same thing. They want to provide their people opportunity, education, discipline when necessary, build their self-confidence, give them the opportunity to try and fail, all so that they could achieve more than we could ever imagine for ourselves. Charlie Kim, who's the CEO of a company called NextJump in New York City, a tech company, he makes the point that if you had hard times in your family, would you ever consider laying off one of your children? We would never do it. Then why do we consider laying off people inside our organization? Charlie implemented a policy of lifetime employment. If you get a job at NextJump, you cannot get fired for performance issues. In fact, if you have issues, they will coach you and they will give you support, just like we would with one of our children who happens to come home with a C from school. It's the complete opposite. This is the reason so many people have such a visceral hatred, sort of anger at some of these banking CEOs with their disproportionate salaries and bonus structures. It's not the numbers. It's that they have violated the very definition of leadership. They have violated this deep-seated social contract. We know that they allowed their people to be sacrificed so they could protect their own interests. Or worse, they sacrificed their people to protect their own interests. This is what so offends us, not the numbers. Would anybody be offended if we gave a $150 million bonus to Gandhi? How about a $250 million bonus to Mother Teresa? Do we have an issue with that? None at all. None at all. Great leaders would never sacrifice the people to save the numbers. They would sooner sacrifice the numbers to save the people. Bob Chapman, who runs a large manufacturing company in the Midwest called Barry Waymiller, in 2008, he was hit very hard by the recession, and they lost 30% of their orders overnight. Now, in a large manufacturing company, this is a big deal, and they could no longer afford their labor pool. They needed to save $10 million. So, like so many companies today, the board got together and discussed layoffs. And Bob refused. You see, Bob doesn't believe in head counts. Bob believes in heart counts. And it's much more difficult to simply reduce the heart count. And so they came up with a furlough program. Every employee from secretary to CEO was required to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They could take it any time they wanted, and they did not have to take it consecutively. But it was how Bob announced the program that mattered so much. He said, it's better that we should all suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot. And morale went up. They saved $20 million. And most importantly, as would be expected, when the people feel safe and protected by the leadership in the organization, the natural reaction is to trust and cooperate. And quite spontaneously, nobody expected, people started trading with each other. Those who could afford it more would trade with those who could afford it less. People would take 5 weeks so that somebody else only had to take 3. Leadership is a choice. It is not a rank. I know many people at the senior-most levels of organizations who are absolutely not leaders. They are authorities, and we do what they say because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them. And I know many people who are at the bottoms of organizations who have no authority, and they are absolutely leaders. And this is because they have chosen to look after the person to the left of them, and they have chosen to look after the person to the right of them. This is what a leader is. I heard a story of some Marines who were out in theater, and as is the Marine custom, the officer ate last, and he let his men eat first. And when they were done, there was no food left for him. And when they went back out in the field, his men brought him some of their food so that he may eat. Because that's what happens. We call them leaders because they go first. We call them leaders because they take the risk before anybody else does. We call them leaders because they will choose to sacrifice so that their people may be safe and protected, and so their people may gain. And when we do, the natural response is that our people will sacrifice for us. They will give us their blood and sweat and tears to see that their leader's vision comes to life. And when we ask them, why would you do that? Why would you give your blood and sweat and tears for that person? They all say the same thing. Because they would have done it for me. And isn't that the organization we would all like to work in? Thank you very much. Thank you.
He's very famous, Simon Sinek.
Thank you.
As a leadership consultant, do you think he's right? He makes sense? But it's really the exact opposite of what most organizations do. They sacrifice the people first because labor is one of the most expensive, probably it is the most expensive cost to most enterprises. So keeping wages low, what we've seen in America and it's paralleled in Australia is company profits have grown very significantly as a percentage of revenue, grown significantly over the last decade since the recession, the Great Recession 2008, and yet wages have been stagnant. So there's a theory of trickle-down economics. When companies make more, they can afford to pay more, but guess what? They don't. And so it's quite an economic problem, and we'll see tomorrow night Josh Frydenberg, our treasurer, will have a pre-election budget, and there'll be some sweeteners for workers in terms of tax cuts or handouts to partially as a tokenism to try and address this major economic problem faced in most developed countries, the stagnation of wage growth. So it has to do with the loss of unions, that trade unions are far less prevalent, far less membership of trade unions, far less power that trade unions have as advocates of workers. It's got to do with the casualization of the workforce, with work hire companies, contract labor, all designed to reduce labor cost. So the contemporary thinking is exactly the opposite. Interestingly, too, especially in the United States, as company profits have grown and Trump has stimulated the economy with very significant federal tax cuts, companies are using the money, the surplus capital from profit and tax cuts, to buy back their own shares. So they know that they're returning 3, 4, 5% net profit after tax. That's their return from their business, and the cost of capital is low, is maybe 2 or 3%. So the easiest way to boost the bottom line is to buy back their own shares. That feeds into executive bonuses, because executives are paid on the share price performance and on the bottom line performance. Improves the bottom line, investing in their own company, and improves the share price and boosts their bonuses. But in fact, most economists think they should be doing exactly the opposite. Selling more shares, raising more capital when times are good, when there's interest in the market, and when we're in a recession and the share price is tanking, that's when they should be supporting their shares. But they do exactly the opposite, and it's speculated for self-interest to boost bonuses, executive bonuses. So it's quite amazing. In other words, when the tide changes, the tide's running in at the moment, it's sort of a bull market, but when the tide changes, without the support of stock buybacks, it makes the drop in share price all that more dramatic. So we see exactly the opposite, in fact, to what Simon Sinek is recommending. But that doesn't mean that you have to be caught up in the greedy corporate culture. You're a project manager leading your team. So what Simon is saying is you need to care for your team, look after your team. And basically it's quite true that motivated employees deliver much better service than those who are demotivated. You'll think about the jobs you've had and how well you do the job. And how well you do the job depends on your level of motivation. Yeah? Yeah? No, it's a very, very good principle. I think he's absolutely right. But the point being is most companies tend to do the opposite. They tend to want to get the most labour out of their staff for the least pay, which means the staff respond by doing the least amount of work for the most amount of pay. Very negative, a negative cycle. Another look at leadership comes from Walter Isaacson, the biographer of Steve Jobs, talking about the leadership lessons of Steve Jobs, who is a very interesting leader here. So Steve Jobs, very focused. You know, if you look at Samsung and the number of products they have, it's unbelievable. And Samsung had the Note 8, which exploded. The Note 7. Oh, okay, 7, sorry. Okay, you had the 7. And now you got the 8, and you don't want me disparaging the 8. Okay. Have the 9, okay. So the 7 exploded. They have washing machines. That exploded too. They're absolutely way. You go and Google it, exploding and find. Go to that site called YouTube. You might find some video of exploding Samsung washing machines. So, Apple's had its product problems, but doesn't have the same type of problems as Samsung, because Apple is very focused, where Samsung, its main competitor, is very diverse, and you don't get the quality, you don't get the following necessarily. So that's a very good principle. Simplify. There was a war, a polite war, between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. And in the first round, Bill Gates won. There's no doubt. Windows killed Apple. The Apple Mac was a very exotic machine. Designers liked it. But Wintel architecture, Windows PC, was the IBM PC. and Wintel architecture dominated. And Apple got into so much trouble they almost went bankrupt and invited Steve back at that stage. But they fired him at one stage because he had lost the war against Windows. But he learned something. He learned that you have to simplify. And the success of the iPhone can be attributed to its simplicity. Now, I was teaching at the time, so I remember a student of mine, and I'd had one of the Nokia whatevers, and I had just ordered an iPhone, the iPhone 3. I said, it's a gorgeous product. And I'm saying, oh God, look, I've ordered this new iPhone, and it'll probably take me a week to learn how to use it. And one of my students pipes up and says, Ian, it won't. You'll be using it straight away. And I said, well, I'll look forward to that. Thank you for the feedback. The student was absolutely right. This is the impute. Impute here. You take it out of its big box, which is oversized. It's very elaborate packaging. That is, you're imputing an art. Something has come from a designer store, in terms of the package. I mean, ladies, if you've ever bought a very nice handbag, doesn't that handbag come with its dust cover? It comes in another handbag. And look, I've bought my wife a nice handbag, and I've said to the shop assistant, you want to just take it? Ah! No! You can't do that. You can't take it as a handbag. No, you have to take it home in its packaging and everything and look at it and photograph it and study it and worship it. I don't know what you do, ladies, with your handbags. It's expensive enough to be worshipped. Anyway, that's part of the impute, right? Imputing, implying that this is more than just a handbag. It's more than just a piece of technology. Guys, you want to work on it? There's plenty of room outside. So the beauty of the iPhone was its simplicity, and we see that in all of the apps. You either swipe or find the menu, and left or right, up and down. That's it. In 2 minutes, you know what it does. If you don't like it, you get rid of it. So he simplified computing, where Windows is today still horribly, horribly complex. Take responsibility end to end. So ironically, Apple is the world's largest consumer electronics company, and is often the world's largest company too, depending on how its share price is going. And it manufactures nothing. But they take responsibility end to end, the design, the quality, the distribution, and leaving it all to delight customers. When behind Leapfrog, that's what he did with the mobile phones. Apple was a new player, and leapfrogs Sony Ericsson, Nokia, all of the players at the time. And China's doing that. If you look at WeChat, it's just leapfrogged our idea of e-commerce, that e-commerce is most usable when it's mobile. It's most usable when we have an integrated ecosystem, an integrated environment. So China has leapfrogged the browser-based Western notion of e-commerce. Put products before profits. So deliver a quality product first, and then customers will come, and when they come, they'll then give you the economies of scale that you need to make a profit. The profit comes second, quality first. Don't be a slave to focus groups. So he wasn't scared to innovate. So the old story is, if Henry Ford had asked focus groups, groups of consumers, what would they like for transport, improved transport, do you know what they would have said? What would they would have said? Yes, faster horses, a faster carriage. They wouldn't have said a motor car. Bend reality, I've talked about enough. Imputing, I've talked about. Push for perfection. He was very OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder in this regard, being obsessive about perfection, and hence he only tolerated A players. Engage face to face, know the big picture, but he was very hands-on with the details. But he liked to combine the humanities with the sciences to bring some art to an electronic device, and stay hungry, stay foolish. So interesting. Read the biography of Steve Jobs, written by Walter Isaacson, and it's a very good read. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from Steve Jobs. He was also a bit crazy too. So Steve Jobs wasn't a manager, he was a leader. And there's quite a difference here. So we need leadership for the relationship between the project manager and the stakeholders, especially the sponsor. The engineering approach assumes that you'll work together, everybody will work for the progress of the project. But the thing is that shit happens, that things go wrong, and that's when you need leadership. So, serving as a peacemaker when tensions arise, acting in an apolitical manner, making trade-offs amongst time, cost, scope. Entire project plan might become obsolete and you need to cancel the project. So management is like the accountant, coping with complexity, whereas leadership is coping with change, and we get a lot of resistance to change. So this is often a conflict in qualities. Great leaders are not interested in the detail. And you'll find with entrepreneurial firms, the venture capitalists are looking for a partnership, looking for a team of people where you do have the entrepreneur and the visionary who's doing something different and is trying to convince the market that this is an opportunity, trying to change, but you need an accountant type person to keep that person constrained to reality, to what's affordable. And you need this blend, the leadership with the management here. And they're often two different people. So part of leadership is this social network building, is to get the political IOUs. It's very common in a lot of cultures, Asian cultures in particular, a very good thing, and that is people like to do favors for their friends. And that's how you build great friendships, because you're doing something for your friend, and your friend is now obligated when you need to return the favor. Does that make sense? So one good turn deserves another. So that's what we mean by social network building. And how you help somebody can be offering them friendship, just listening to them. It can be sharing some resources. You've got some expertise on your team that might be able to help another project manager with a problem they're facing and lend them that expertise. It could be training, sharing your knowledge. It could be a good word in court, singing the praises of somebody who's doing a very good job and helping them to get promoted. They'll certainly remember that. So if you work to build your social network, if you build up these social IOUs, then you'll find people will cooperate with you a lot more. So a lot of you have got the wrong idea about working in an organization, especially a large organization. Your idea might be your job is to sit in front of the computer and do everything that's required, answer all your emails, and be an efficient worker. But that's only half the job. The other half the job is walking about, is getting to know people, helping other people, being seen as a team player, and cultivating this network. And again, it's a conflict in skills, isn't it? A lot of you have done IT because you'd rather not have to deal with people. Yes? Well, I've got some bad news for you. If you want to progress in IT and get promoted beyond just even a senior technical role, even if you have a senior technical role, you still have to deal with people, because then you're responsible for the productivity of your technical team, and it means you have to train, motivate, cajole your team members to deliver the goods. So it's only at the lowest role where you have the least amount of interaction with people.
You can always just pick the ones that don't need all that stuff and what they're really good anyway, and call them A team.
Yeah, but you won't always end up with an A team. And after you've done really well with your A team, you'll get promoted, and then you'll inherit all of those B, C, and Ds. One day that happens, doesn't it, David?
You give them to other people.
Yeah, but then you can't get promoted, you see. You won't advance. You won't advance if you haven't got the skill to extract the most out of everyone. Once you set that high standard, that high bar, those who fail to meet the bar, you just have a very interesting conversation with them and manage them out of your team. And say, you don't fit in this team. You must be feeling very uncomfortable. You're not meeting the standard. So I don't agree completely with Simon Sinek that you can hire people for life and you can't fire anybody any time. You wouldn't fire one of your children, true. However, I think the leader's job is those who are not interested, not motivated, not capable, to manage them out and maintain the standard within the team. But anyway, what happens with our management style is we tend to emulate, tend to copy somebody we've worked for. So some advice I can give you is observe. Observe the people you work for and find those good attributes, those things that you really like about the person you work for, and note them down, and also note down the things that you don't like. And that's the pattern for you. When you get the opportunity, you will exhibit those positive characteristics, and you'll stay clear from the negative ones. So there's social network. We need cooperation. We need approval. And with opponents too is understanding. Just by showing an understanding, I understand what you're talking about. So your problem seems to be that you want the degree and you don't want to do any work. Do I have your position correct? Do I understand you correctly? So show that you understand to begin with. Doesn't mean you have to agree.
No, we actually want a good degree.
That's right. You see, you can't have everything, can you, in this world? So this is this step into their shoes, this showing empathy. Do you understand what the word empathy means? What does empathy mean? Yes, you understand their position. I understand what you're saying. Doesn't mean I agree. But you have to show empathy here. And so there's a lot of difference between yourself and the people you depend. They have different goals, different values, different aspirations, different styles, different risks here. So how do the different people view the project? Supporters are good. Keep them enthusiastic. Those indifferent, try and recruit them to your side. And those antagonists, ask them, I understand you're not in favour of this project. Can you tell me why? That's interesting. Why do you say that? Draw them out and show at least you understand. Now I understand your position. Then you can say, however, I think you need some more information. And try and bring them around. At least showing that you understand their position. Can't please all the people all the time. What's the current status of the relationship I have with the people I depend on? So what sources of influence can I bring to bear?
boss likes it, so you have to do it.
Sometimes. So, your boss, the sponsor, is the most important stakeholder. So you have to try and listen to your boss. That's number one. But number two, I think you can educate your boss. So David's my boss, and I go, so David, you want me to do X, Y, and Z? And you go, yeah, you got it, Ian. Go ahead and do it. I can certainly do that, David. However, there are probably some complications. There are probably some issues we need to work through. Oh, what are those? And then you'll give the complications, and then you'll say, how about where we agree, I start with that, and then I come back and report to you after that. And boss thinks, well, I'm making some progress with him. He might be right. I'll let him do that piece that he agrees with, and we'll come back. In other words, I'm easing the boss into the position of, no, I'm not going to do it. So one way, one very interesting way of looking at who is with you and who's against you is a force field analysis, and this comes from Robbins. And so as an example, just to show you how a force field analysis works, is imagine that the present state is that we have a marketing function in each country, or right across the country. Say, for instance, right across Australia. So we're a national company. We operate Australia-wide, and we have marketing people in all the capital cities of Australia, in Brisbane, in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, and we don't bother about. We always leave Tasmania off the map anyway. It's too small to worry about, population-wise. And so what we want to do, though, is we want to centralise our marketing function here in Sydney. So, first of all, what are these arrows going from left to right are in favour, those working from right to left are against, right? So what's in favour? Well, it's a new organisational strategy. It's in our strategic plan. Leadership want it. It's approved. It's policy. That there's a need to centralise. That it's more dynamic function if we get everybody together. It's more efficient. It's cheaper. But what are for those who have to move, well, do they really want? There's a fear of moving to a new city. There's increased living costs in Sydney. And there's a sense of job insecurity. So if you know this is pretty obvious. If you know this, what you would do is you would approach the key marketing people, not in Sydney, and say, we really want you to stay on the team. We really want to encourage you to come to Sydney. And you would give them maybe a contract of continued employment, guaranteed employment for a period of time, 12 or 24 months, so that they don't move and suddenly find themselves retrenched. So give them a generous contract, so that if you retrench them, you have to buy out the contract. Basically, give them a moving allowance, a moving bonus to compensate them for the cost. Give them more responsibility. So when you know who is against you, you can work out, you can co-opt them too. You can get people against you and co-optation means that you give them an important position. So Malcolm Turnbull's downfall was he was never able to co-opt Tony Abbott. He didn't want to give Tony Abbott a cabinet position. He offered him ambassador to the UK, which is a very prestigious role. That's how he tried to get rid of him. Tony would have nothing, no bar of it, and ended up with the death of Malcolm Turnbull's prime ministership. He was never able to silence his main critic, Tony Abbott. Glasbergen's a very funny cartoonist and very typical corporate style cartoons. So as I said, you've got to manage by walking about. Sitting at your desk behind the computer won't make you an effective leader. So we have this obsession with email. It's counterproductive. We need face-to-face to build relationship and tacit knowledge.
It's easier face-to-face when they're all in the one city.
Correct. You can have video conferencing, video meetings, though, as well. Assists with anticipating problems, because face-to-face people will tell you things. Helps dispel rumors, gain commitment. Don't wait for problems, see stakeholders. I had that issue just before I left to come tonight. We have a routine. We routinely review units. And we're reviewing my old unit, ITEC 871. Did anybody do ITEC 871 last year? Yeah, a few of you. It was a bit disconnected between the Zhang and me. Would you agree? Yeah, it's quite different, isn't it? The two pieces. It is, yes, yeah. So it's controversial, really is, because the Zhang takes the Tableau database approach, and I talk about ERP, completely two different directions. Yes, yeah, it's very confusing. Yeah. Difficult to make the jump. Beg your pardon? Difficult to make the jump. It is. It's like two different courses, yeah? Where you'll find Stephen and I, we're much more in sync, and I've already introduced you to risk management in assignment 1, and Steve will drill down very much in treating risk, and I've used agile methodologies to treat risk, so I've stolen a lot of his material. I wrote the lecture on politics. I'm stealing his material as we speak. It's my material anyway. So we're much more harmonious. It's a much more harmonious combination. Yeah, you'll find that anyway. So it's being reviewed, and Peter Bush is temporarily the director of the program. There's a new lecturer. His name's Amin, who is going to take over as director of the program. So Peter sends me an email to say, oh, well, we're having, thanks for your comments on the review, but we're supposed to have a sit down, but, you know, you're only in a couple of evenings. Maybe we should do it without you. I said, that's interesting, sort of thing, response. I said, I said, yes, I understand. However, I'm available at this and this time, and I think I'd like to participate, given that there are some interesting issues around the unit that need to be discussed. So I've told him no way. Even though I'm not directly paid for it. That's what he's saying. You're not paid for it, why bother? Oh no, give me a lot of trouble if I'm not there. And you've got to be face to face, you know, see the whites of their eyes. And I'll be well prepared too with the historical unit guides, the current unit outline, the current student feedback, the results, which weren't very good last year. We had quite a high failure rate. I can trace the failure rate too. I know where the poorer students failed to perform. So I'm putting together the facts. I'll stick to the facts, stick to the evidence, prosecute my case. You got it, don't you? You got to be there, face to face. The new guy's got to see who I am. I've got to be able to express my views to influence the decision, to have it decided in a way that suits me. That's my preference anyway. So you've got to be face to face, you see, and share that tacit information. Don't wait for problems to see the stakeholders. That results in excess tension. Dispel the rumors. Manage expectations. So email's counterproductive. I had a dispute that just resolved too, just this afternoon. So the wife's got a shop. I've mentioned that to you before. It was a good project in fitting it out. That was a bit of fun, using project management skills. The lease came with a parking spot that she wanted, but the car park's really horrible, really diabolically small, especially the spots that are available for the shop. It's a big building, and the car park is shared with the owners, the residents of the building, and they get the good nominated spots, reserved spots, and the commercial units end up with these very tiny spots between columns in a very, very small car park. It's diabolical. So the wife hated the car park and found out she doesn't need it anyway. She prefers taking the train. It's only one stop. You know, we live in Chatswood and this is in our town, and it's just easier just to jump off and on the train. It comes every 5 minutes or so and everything. And here's the dispute. The dispute is that the solicitor for the lessor forgot to charge us for the car park. So now 9 months into the lease, we haven't been paying for the car park. But I had complained to the agent very early on, and the agent says, we're not paying for it anyway. And I went, oh yeah, you're right, we're not paying for it anyway. Oh well, all's well in the world. Well, the lessor's solicitor rings me up to say, you haven't been paying for the car park. And I went, we haven't been using it. No, you've got to pay for it. And I said, no, I don't. You didn't put it in the contract. Yes, well, I won't talk about the morality or the ethics of your view, but we'll sue you. I said, I'm not talking to you anymore. So, of course, what I did straight away is I rang the principal, not our agent who looks after the place. I talked to the principal to say, I've just been insulted by the lessor's solicitor. Can you tell the lessor, his solicitor, if he's got something to say, put it in writing to me. In fact, it's much worse than that. What the lessor solicitor said is, you will lose your option on your lease. We won't give you your option. So what I said back to the principal is, so first of all, he insulted me and implied that I'm unethical, immoral, because I'm not paying for something I'm using, and he didn't listen to the argument that we don't want it. We're not. You know? Not using. That's our position. That's right. And we, in fact, it maybe was unethical because we never got a chance to look at it before executing the lease, because the lessor didn't make the fob, the electronic gate key, available. Couldn't even have seen it beforehand. Maybe that's unethical. But also, it was illogical to say we're in breach of lease and we will lose our option. That's illogical, because we're fully compliant with the lease. Otherwise, why would the lessor want us to execute a variation of the lease? That was the nature of the call. I want you to execute a variation of the lease. And my response was, well, no thanks. I'm quite happy with the lease the way it is. So that's illogical. So I let the agent, let the principal go back to the lessor, and 3-4 days later, fullness of time, I'm in no hurry, I'm not paying for this anyway. He said, well, I've talked to the lessor and blah, blah, blah. To cut a long story short, is a lessor suggests that you pay 50% of the parking cost starting from the next month, and that you be given the right to sublease if you want, because the lease had precluded us from sublease. Yeah, well, half the price is better than full the price, and if we have a staff member who wants to drive, we have the spot available if they can get into the spot. We have a small car maybe and a good driver. That might work, but I can also sublease it if I want to. I don't want to get into a dispute. I said, okay, I'll put that in writing. So I put that all the terms and conditions in writing. Surprisingly, the next day he comes back, no, it's been rejected. You have to pay for the whole lot from the very beginning. I wasn't sure when I'd heard that. What should I do? So guess what I did? I asked Darren, the principal of this large real estate company in Chatswood, so he runs a considerable business here. I said, Darren, what do you think I should do? What do you think he said? Do nothing, basically, yeah. So Darren said, give it back to them. Don't move your position. Okay, thanks. I had dinner waiting for the lecture last Wednesday, I'm eating my dinner, and just thinking over dinner, on my mobile phone, I typed up my response. Tell the lessor, I'll see them in the district court. My argument to the magistrate will be, the lessor behaved unethically in not enabling us to see the car park. After executing the lease, we were able to inspect the car park and we found it unsuitable. We then complained. The agent then said, your complaint is not a problem because you're not paying for it anyway, not provided for in the lease. We're happy, we shouldn't be here today, we're not using it, we don't want it, the lease is perfectly fine, Your Honour. It's a good argument. It's a good argument. So I typed that up while I'm enjoying my curry chicken. Darren just rings me just now and says that the lessor is willing to accept my original offer. He beat the lessor about the ears, and he told the lessor he should tell his lawyer to go back under the rock under which he crawled out of. So, what are the principles of leadership and management here is, I didn't try to handle it by email. I got on the phone to a network. You see, the agent works for the lessor. The lessor pays the agent. However, the agent understands better than anybody the importance of the customer, the lessee. The option will come, and there'll come a day where I might say, I don't want it anymore. There's many other shops. We've had it with you. And then that means the shop's going to be empty, and it means that the lessor will hire lots and lots of other agents, and the lessor will get very angsty, and it'll be trouble. So the agent, although he doesn't work for me, he's interested in keeping me happy. He doesn't like to see litigation because the option is then threatened as well. But I'm like to say you can take your option and stick it to, and that was in my response too. Is it illogical to threaten the option? Does he not want a tenant? A reliable tenant? You know? So he could see this all blowing up. So I pitched it that it's in his interest to resolve it. That's why he came up with the solution. The lessor checked with his lawyer. So this comes back to the leadership and the political issue is you can't please all the people all the time. Who was the obstacle? Who was the obstructionist in all of this? The lawyer. Why? Why was he so adamant to advise his client, don't concede, don't agree, stay with your position? Why was he so taking such a forceful view? Why?
Because if you break a job or you chop more.
That's true. What else?
It was his mistake.
It was his mistake. That's why he rang me. He wants to bully me into fixing his mistake. You can't please all the people all the time. He was not going to be pleased. I was wasting my time and giving him ammunition in talking to him. I hung up on him. I know where you're coming from. You're not even listening to me. You're trying to be a bully. I don't even want to hear it. I got rid of him. Then who's going to be interested in helping me? Who's got authority, of course, too, right? the lessor's agent. And not the young guy who's looking after us, not the property manager. I need the boss. Straight to the boss, because he's going to have more authority, more experience, and he got a deal. And then when his deal was rejected, because, I'm weighing up, should I concede? Should I go to court? How am I going to handle it? What should I do? Right? And he said, give it right back to them. Hold your ground. And so I said, I'll see you in court, and this is going to be my argument. And that's armed the agent, Darren. Darren's gone back to lessor and says, well, Ian's argument's not a bad one. So now what will happen is you'll get nothing for your parking spot for the whole term of his lease, and maybe for his option too. It'll carry through for 10 years now. You won't get a cent for that parking spot because it will be ruled by court. It'll be a court judgment, but no money required, and that lease can't be changed. It's a one-way option. That's what an option is. Here, for 10 years, you get nothing for your parking spot, and you've got all the legal fees, because you're not like Ian. Ian just represents himself. I've got no expense, and all the time in the world, if you like. That's the picture I'm painting, right? And you've got endless expense with your Macquarie. He's a Macquarie Street lawyer. He's $500 an hour, right? And he'll want a barrister probably to help him argue the case, and I'll just sit there. Yes, Your Honour. Yes, Your Honour. Your Honour, can I respond? Yes, yes. Because in the district court, they're very happy to help the poor defendant. What do you have to say? So, social network building, who can help you? Dovetail the interests to resolve it. And then, of course, I said, I'll stick by my original offer. Why? Because the court case could go against me, and I want to keep a good relationship with the lessor, and I don't want a dispute. I've come out with a compromise. I'm paying half the price for a parking spot I don't even want. So you have to use leadership skills. Here you can't use email. You have to talk to people. You have to listen to people and try and understand where the interests lie. Who is going to be your ally in all of this? And it was Darren, it was the principal of the agency who was my ally in all of this, convincing the lessor, these are bad ideas your lawyer is giving you. He's giving you very, very bad advice. And he prevailed. But I was quite happy to go to court. That's it. Yeah, okay, fine, that's my argument. Because I had nothing to lose. Either the magistrate would compel me to go with the original negotiation that was not included in the lease, and so therefore I have to concede to the other side, right? But I had everything to gain and nothing to lose. So again, Darren would have pointed that out too. So some people you can't budge, like the lessor's solicitor. He had made his mistake. He wanted a dispute, possibly to increase the cost for his client. Here, he wasn't interested in the other side's argument, but that's very bad lawyering because the judge will listen to both sides here. So some interesting stories from the field, if you like. Trying to keep you awake, I guess. So, leading by example. If we go back to Larson talks about standards of performance, problem solving, priorities, cooperation, urgency, and ethics being important. So priorities, walking the talk, showing the team what's important to you. Urgency, the pace of daily interactions reflects the pace of the project. You have to have some urgency for some early deliverables. I create severe urgency here by giving you assignments with very hard deadlines and very stiff penalties. It was amazing. I think about a quarter of the class was late. You lose 10% straight off, 10% off the whole lot. The whole assignment's worth 20%, so 2 marks gone straight away just by being late. So we have severe penalties. Student syndrome at work here, leaving everything to the last minute. So we create urgency, and you have to have problem solving. Turn problems into opportunities to learn from mistakes. Oh, it's still today. I mean, so many emails you got. Please see the attachment. Couldn't you just put it in the email? So cooperation. How the project manager acts towards outsiders influences the team behavior. So avoid disparaging other groups within the organization. Try and keep everything civil. And standards of performance. I'm here on time. I expect you to be on time. If you're late, guess what happens? You've missed out. Ethics. So, tell it the way it is. Don't lie. So, qualities of an effective project manager, according to Larson, you have to innovate but still be stable. And that's agile methodologies enable you to do that. Enable you to trial and prototype and test innovative solutions without blowing the whole budget and schedule of the project, failing fast. Here, see the big picture while getting your hands dirty. Maybe you should delegate the technical. Encourage individuals, but stress the team. So you have to avoid any behaviour that is negative to the whole group. Hands-on and hands-off. Know when to be hands-on, but less so, I think. Flexible but firm. So responsive to events, but hold the line when everybody else wants to give up. Team, and that's what Darren was telling me, to be firm. Hold the line. Team versus organizational loyalties here, that the team must be have synergy, but there's a problem of going native, and that is that infatuation with the team and not meeting the organizational requirements. So you can read that yourself. Get on with the job, replan, reorganize, reschedule, reallocate, remotivate. Overcoming problems, part of what turns you on. Feels good to manage a complex issue through to a successful conclusion. But you don't do it on your own. Yeah, well, I had to be the team player there, you see. You noticed. Putting into practice. And I've got something just before the break. We'll have a quick look at, again, another great leader, the lessons learned from Nelson Mandela, which are quite extraordinary. He is an unbelievable, he was an unbelievable leader. See whether this will work. So a good leader can engage in a debate frankly and thoroughly, knowing that at the end, he and the other side must be closer and thus emerge stronger. You don't have that idea when you are arrogant, superficial, and uninformed. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. It's better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory and nice things occur. You take the front line when there is danger, then people appreciate your leadership. Resentment's like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. Long speeches, the shaking of fists, the banging of tables, and strongly worded resolutions out of touch with the objective conditions do not bring about mass action and can do a great deal of harm to the organisation and struggle we serve. Do not judge me by my successes, judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. Grit. The Americans talk about. There's a remake of the movie True Grit. Rooster Cogburn was John Wayne originally, and then Jeff Bridges does a very good role. Watch the movie True Grit. You know what we mean by grit? It means it doesn't matter how many times you're knocked down, it's how you get back up again that counts. It's a difference. That's really one of the main differences between those who are successful and those who have failed. It's not that those who are successful at everything they do. It's how many times they get knocked down and come back up again. Until eventually they are. Look at Steve Jobs. He was fired. Apple was heading for bankruptcy. He came back with zero pay and developed the iPod, which became the iPhone, and the iPad. Real leaders must be ready to sacrifice all for the freedom of their people. Action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming, but vision with action can change the world. We don't have a vision in our political system at the moment in many areas, in climate change, in energy policy, in taxation. And that's probably why our Liberal National Coalition will get voted out. Whereas Gladys got to keep her job because she's doing stuff, has a vision for New South Wales, and it's the leading economy in Australia. I beg your pardon? That helps too, especially being released 1 week before the election. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. The team. Oh, is that it? Oh, I wanted more. It's very, very good anyway. Have a break and we'll talk about team management. Got some videos there too. said too. Students are trying to multitask. They're doing many other things on the iPad that they're not finding the materials easy. It's very difficult, in fact, with the neat text to find what you're looking for. Whereas you can put bookmarks, post-it notes in a textbook, and if it's your textbook, you're not worried about reselling it, you can highlight it, and you can make your own notes in the margins too. It's all lost.
What was difficult if you have body book taxes?
What the school said is that they give the students lockers and they can keep the texts in the school, and then they can use the e-texts at home. You're absolutely right, they're very heavy. I carry here on my phone, if I look at my bookshelf app, bookshelf. See, too hard to find. I'll use the, oh no, is it there? Did I find it? No, too hard to find. I'll use the search. Bookshelf. Oh, see, I've got a book there that I was looking at. Enterprise Systems for Management is what I was looking at last, but I want to go home. View all titles. I've got 13 textbooks. 13 texts. Inch-thick texts. Here.
Which makes it difficult to store. You need a really carry-on to carry those.
That's it. That's exactly it. And it's very useful, because students will ask, is that right? Can you explain that? Very good question. I'll come back to you later. Mind it here and go, there is an explanation. It is right. So yeah, I get it. I get the technology, but that's just interesting that our brains are analog. Our brains are not digital. On Netflix, they've got an animated series. I normally don't like animations, and some of them are terrible, but some of them are very good. I think it's Love, Death, and Robots. How about the 3 robots who are checking out post-apocalypse Earth? I don't know why the triangular robot needs to take a picture when in fact they've got digital memory. Just look at something that's already photographed. But yeah, that was very funny. So yeah, digital works different to analog. Robots as tourists. That was very imaginative, very, very clever. Anyway, I'm digressing. Let's talk about team management, because that's what you came to hear. So we've got a video. Thought you have fun. This is Daniel Pink, 12 million views. And this is the RSA Animate version of Daniel Pink's lecture on drive. What drives us? What motivates us? It's really very good.
In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to start making professional-looking animations like this one.
How easy is it to block ads?
Our motivations are unbelievably interesting. I mean, I've been working on this for a few years, and I just find the topic still so amazingly engaging and interesting. So I want to tell you about that. The science is really surprising. The science is a little bit freaky, okay? We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think. There's a whole set of unbelievably interesting studies. I want to give you 2 that call into question this idea that if you reward something, you get more of the behavior you want. If you punish something, you get less of it. So let's go from London to the mean streets of Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the northeastern part of the United States. And let's talk about a study done at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here's what they did. They took a whole group of students, and they gave them a set of challenges. Things like memorizing strings of digits, solving word puzzles, other kinds of spatial puzzles, even physical tasks like throwing a ball through a hoop. Okay, they gave them these challenges, and they said to incentivize their performance, they gave them 3 levels of rewards. Okay, so if you did pretty well, you got a small monetary reward. If you did medium well, you got a medium monetary reward. And if you did really well, if you were one of the top performers, you got a large cash prize. Okay? We've seen this movie before. This is essentially a typical motivation scheme within organizations, right? We reward the very top performers, we ignore the low performers, and the other folks kind of in the middle. Okay, you get a little bit. So what happens? They do the test, they have these incentives, here's what they found out. One, as long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better the performance. Okay, that makes sense. But here's what happens. But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Now this is strange, right? A larger reward led to poorer performance? How can that possibly be? Now what's interesting about this is that these folks here who did this are all economists, two at MIT, one at the University of Chicago, one at Carnegie Mellon, okay, the top tier of the economics profession. And they're reaching this conclusion that seems contrary to what a lot of us learned in economics, which is that the higher the reward, the better the performance. And they're saying that once you get above rudimentary cognitive skill, it's the other way around. Which seems like this kind of, the idea that these rewards don't work that way seems vaguely left-wing and socialist, doesn't it? It's kind of this kind of weird socialist conspiracy. For those of you who have those conspiracy theories, I want to point out the notoriously left-wing socialist group that financed the research, the Federal Reserve Bank. So this is the mainstream of the mainstream coming to a conclusion that's quite surprising. Seems to defy the laws of behavioral physics. So this is strange. It's strange finding. So what do? They say, this is freaky. Let's go test it somewhere else. Maybe that $50 or $60 prize isn't sufficiently motivating for an MIT student, right? So let's go to a place where $50 is actually more significant relatively, right? So let's take the experiment. We're going to go to Madurai, India, rural India, where $50, $60, whatever the number was, is actually a significant sum of money. So they replicated the experiment in India roughly as follows. Small rewards, the equivalent of 2 weeks' salary. Small performance, low performance, 2 weeks' salary. Medium performance, about a month's salary. High performance, about 2 months' salary. Okay, so those are real good incentives. Okay, so you're going to get a different result here. Well, what happened, though, was that the people offered the medium reward did no better than the people offered the small reward. But this time around, the people offered the top reward. They did worst of all. Higher incentives led to worse performance. What's interesting about this is that it actually isn't all that anomalous. This has been replicated over and over and over again by psychologists, by some extent by sociologists, and by economists, over and over and over again. For simple, straightforward tasks, those kinds of incentives, if you do this, then you get that, they're great. For tasks that are algorithmic, set of rules where you have to just follow along and get a right answer, if-then rewards, carrots and sticks, outstanding. But when the task gets more complicated, when it requires some conceptual creative thinking, those kinds of motivators demonstrably don't work. In fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money and they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are 3 factors that the science shows lead to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is our desire to be self-directed, to direct our own lives. Now, in many ways, traditional notions of management run afoul of that. Management is great if you want compliance, but if you want engagement, which is what we want in the workforce today as people are doing more complicated, sophisticated things, self-direction is better. Let me give you some examples of this, almost radical forms of self-direction in the workplace that lead to good results. Let's start with this company right here, Atlassian. An Australian company. It's a software company, and they do something really cool. Once a quarter, on a Thursday afternoon, they say to their developers, for the next 24 hours, you can work on anything you want. You can work on it the way you want. You can work on it with whomever you want. All we ask is that you show the results to the company at the end of those 24 hours in this fun kind of meeting, not a star chamber session, but this fun meeting with beer and cake and fun and other things like that. It turns out that one day of pure, undiluted autonomy has led to a whole array of fixes for existing software, a whole array of ideas for new products that otherwise had never emerged. One day. Now, this is not an if-then incentive. This is not the sort of thing that I would have done 3 years ago before I knew this research. I would have said, you want people to be creative and innovative? Give them a freaking innovation bonus. If you can do something cool, I'll give you $2,500. They're not doing this at all. They're essentially saying, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me just get out of your way. One day of autonomy produces things that have never emerged. Now, let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our urge to get better at stuff. We like to get better at stuff. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. You have all these people who are acting in ways that seem irrational economically. They play musical instruments on weekends. Why? It's not going to get them a mate. It's not going to make them any money. Why are they doing it? Because it's fun, because you get better at it, and that's satisfying. Go back in time a little bit. I imagine this if I went to my first economics professor, a woman named Mary Alice Schulman, and I went to her in 1983 and said, Professor Schulman, can I talk to you after class for a moment? Yeah. I got this inkling. I got this idea for a business model. I just want to run it past you. Here's how it would work. You get a bunch of people around the world who are doing highly skilled work, but they're willing to do it for free and volunteer their time, 20, sometimes 30 hours a week. Okay, she's looking at you somewhat skeptically there. Oh, but I'm not done. And then what they create, they give it away rather than sell it. It's going to be huge. I mean, she truly would have thought I was insane. Okay, it seemed to fly in the face of so many things. But what do you have? You have Linux powering 1 out of 4 corporate servers in Fortune 500 companies, Apache powering more than the majority of web servers, Wikipedia. What's going on? Why are people doing this? Why are these people, many of whom are technically sophisticated, highly skilled people who have jobs? Okay, they have jobs. They're working at jobs for pay, doing sophisticated technological work. And yet, during their limited discretionary time, they do equally, if not more, technically sophisticated work, not for their employer, but for someone else for free. That's a strange economic behavior. Economists who looked into it, why are they doing this? It's overwhelmingly clear. Challenge and mastery, along with making a contribution. That's it. What you see more and more is a rise of what you might call the purpose motive. Is that more and more organizations want to have some kind of transcendent purpose. Partly because it makes coming to work better, partly because that's the way to get better talent. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, when the profit motive becomes unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen. Bad things ethically sometimes, but also bad things just like not good
Screw
stuff.
you, bozo.
Like crappy products, like lame services, like uninspiring places to work. That when the profit motive is paramount, or when it becomes completely unhitched from the purpose motive, it just, people don't do great things. More and more organizations are realizing this and sort of disturbing the categories between what's profit and what's purpose. And I think that actually heralds something interesting. And I think that the organizations that are flourishing, whether they're profit, for profit, or somewhere in between, are animated by this purpose model. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the founder of Skype. He says, our goal is to be disruptive, but in the cause of making the world a better place. Pretty good purpose. Here's Steve Jobs. I want to put a ding in the universe. All right? That's the kind of thing that might get you up in the morning and racing to go to work. So I think that, that we are purpose maximizers, not only profit maximizers. I think the science shows that we care about mastery very, very deeply. And the science shows that we want to be self-directed. And I think that the big takeaway here is that if we start treating people like people and not assuming that they're simply horses, slower, smaller, better-smelling horses, if we get past this kind of ideology of carrots and sticks and look at the science, I think we can actually build organizations and work lives that make us better off, but I also think they have the promise to make our world just a little bit better.
So very good from Daniel Pink. So I have a very important question pursuant to this. How did they find somebody who can draw that fast? So autonomy, mastery, purpose, or vision. That's how you motivate your team. And TED Talks are very interesting, but we don't have time. There's the full lecture to Daniel Pink. So what happened with paying people more, bonus, etc., was they got too stressed and performance dropped off, too nervous, too much pressure. So pressure doesn't yield results. It's giving people autonomy, encouraging them to develop mastery, but having a purpose, a vision, an overarching goal that can unite people together is what motivates teams. So very interesting work from Daniel Pink. So what we're trying to do is get this synergy, this positive synergy, where we get more than the sum of the parts. Now you'll have fun practicing this in this unit. You'll do some teamwork. You'll work as a group of 4 or maybe 6 or 10. Up to Stephen. I don't know what Stephen's going to do. He might increase the group sizes. It's up to him. But you might find that you're not getting synergy. You might find a lot of time is wasted getting people, fellow students, to do their share of the work, and then when they submit work that you believe is substandard, you've got more work to do in terms of not only your bit, but rewriting their bit. So sometimes we end up with negative synergy, and sometimes we end up with total dysfunction too. We're worse off than where we started. So here you can read this real-life experience of a project manager from Larson. Instead of operating as one team, we fractionalized a series of subgroups, a lot of time wasted gossiping, we slipped behind schedule, we avoided direct conversation, management finally pulled the plug. It was one of the worst project experiences in my life. And yet for the same project manager, well, first I'll go cartoon a little bit. So the same project manager with another team, a contagious excitement within the team. We had our share of problems and setbacks, but we dealt with them straight on, and at times we were able to do the impossible. We all cared about the project and looked out for each other. We challenged each other to do better. One of the most exciting times of my life. So the atmosphere of the team, how you motivate the team, is up to you. So teams that exhibit this positive synergy, they have a common purpose, a vision, which Daniel Pink alludes to, that their expertise is being used. So developing mastery, roles are balanced and shared, energy is exerted towards the problem, not towards competitive struggles, that there is freedom of speech, risk-taking is encouraged, not punished. Members are set high personal standards, set high personal standards of performance, and they identify with the team as a source of professional, personal growth. Again, mastery. So autonomy, mastery, purpose, vision. So motivating the team, things you can do is sharing the client, the purpose, why we're doing this, sharing the vision, involvement in the planning, owning the project and the strategic planning, sharing skills and knowledge, deliver early and often. You see that with DSDM, raising the team profile within the organization, sharing success with the rewards. Often you can't pay people more, and often that's not what really motivates them. When I worked with the sales team, one of the interesting things I did was instead of one cycle, instead of giving them a cash bonus, gave them a $1,000 David Jones voucher. Now there's a fringe benefits tax that had to be paid on that, but it was far better than the equivalent, maybe $1,500 added to their salary, because that just goes into the bank account, it's used to pay bills. But getting the David Jones voucher meant that typically, most of them were men, they could go home to the wife and say, look what I got from the company. This weekend, what are we doing? We're going shopping, going to buy something. And it was... No, but that's a voucher they have to buy from. So the big department store, whether it's Myer, David Jones, doesn't matter. Just In other words, the company getting something for the family, helping the family to go shopping, was seen as much more motivating than the equivalent amount of money in cash, getting the voucher. So time out, being given time out, feedback, positive feedback from management, team's doing a good job, be there when it works, demonstrating to the client, supporting other activities, broadening skill, encouraging some fun and play, arranging for rotation. The organizations are not good at this often, in my experience, is they like to pigeonhole you into a particular role, when in fact you get bored with the role. And asking the team members what they want. We're all motivated by different things. So, Tuckman, Bruce Tuckman in 1965, has been around for a long time, this very famous group dynamic model that, and then this doesn't rhyme, I mean, you know, that the group to begin with is forming. There's a lot of testing of each other, you'll find this, then storming, a lot of conflict, intergroup conflict here. Then finally is norming, some cohesiveness, and then you can get performing, and then adjourning, not adjoining, direction of the group. So the significance of this model, as a project manager, you've got to push the group very quickly to get to the performing and get through all of this. Okay, group, what do you think? And listen to all the feedback. Yep, got it, understood, everything right. Hear it, everything, but this is a job we have to do. Let's go and do it. Again, Agile is very powerful that way. You build something straight away. You build a prototype of what you think the requirements are to give back to the client, and get the client involved who says, no, that's not what we wanted, not at all. Oh, really? Why is that? That's interesting. Why do you say that? And getting the real, listening the real response, what they really want from the project. So you get to performing much, much quicker than going through all of these phases. And I like Gersik's model, which we have already talked to you about. So more contemporary is Gersik in 1991, who proposed this punctuated equilibrium model. And that is that the project has two main phases, phase 1 and phase 2. And about half the time is taken up with phase 1, where the performance is nothing. All this big design up front, all this talking, all of this intergroup conflict, and then finally there's a transition. When it's realized half the time has disappeared and we've done nothing, it's finally there's a performance. And then towards the end is a run to the finish, because the deadline is near. So what Gersik's model tells us is you've got to give the group something early to do. That's why we have an assignment 1 that's due very early in the unit to get you performing. And I've mentioned that as the rationale to you. Here's the model now from Gersik that supports that. So favourable to the development of a high-performance team is having fewer team members, voluntary membership, not mandated, that you serve continuously on the team, not part-time, working for the one phase or the other phase. Is why the multiple hats is very helpful in Agile. You have the same group together. You're not switching in and out members. Full-time assignment to the team, not this matrix of mornings you work on your regular job, afternoon you work on your project. Here, a culture of cooperation and trust. Members report only to the project manager. Again, this speaks against the matrix approach. All relevant functional areas are represented on the team, having that business advisor that we need in DSDM as an example. The project has a compelling objective, purpose, vision. Here, members are in speaking distance of each other. We don't do this, we're emailing each other and everything. But Agile methods like Scrum have a daily stand-up, talking to each other. Correct, and it can be very, very problematic. There's been a lot of outsourcing to Eastern Europe, to India, and if you look at the literature, a lot of companies are back to insourcing because a lot of communication difficulty, a lot of cultural clash. Yeah, but if you look at American innovation, if you look at the clever things that are done, it's done in-house. Google, Facebook, Amazon. They are not outsourcing to India. It's the mediocre organizations possibly, not the very innovative ones. So this is high performance, not low cost. So a high-performance team here, conducting crisp project meetings, having an identity, a shared vision, a reward system, make sense for your team, manage the decision-making, getting buy-in, managing conflict, and having to rejuvenate sometimes the team once if they've had failure or during a long-running project here. So effectively use meetings, have an agenda, crisp meetings, not meetings and organizations are far too long and far too wasteful of time. Co-location, Gary? Co-location of team members.
Being in some teams, and the most productive meeting is when they go to the pub for lunch.
Yeah.
They go every day, and that's where they decide what they're going to do.
Yeah, why not?
Because people not going to the pub get left out.
Yeah, that's again the management by walking about, and that you have to socialize. And it's okay, you can order a lemon, lime, and bitters. You don't have to order a few schooners. You can have light beer too, but you can order anything at the pub. But absolutely, you've got to be part of the team and team members. Yeah. And it's those more sociable people. I don't know. Maybe choose HR, they choose marketing, they choose the arts, and more. I don't know. More introverted people often choose IT, and this is the problem. This is the conflict in skills. So you've got to work against your nature, your shyness, and what you find just being there counts. You don't have to be the most talkative, you don't have to take command, just be there, and people are like, Dave, what do you think? And you go, oh, I like most of it. Oh, what don't you like? Well, there's that piece here, and oh, that's interesting. So, in other words, just being present, you absorb the vibe, you absorb the direction, and people will ask you your view, and if it's an informed view, they'll listen. Creation of a team name and having team rituals, like the pub lunch on Fridays. That would be a team ritual, an important team ritual. So creating a shared vision has to be communicated, has to have strategic sense, has to be inspiring, creating some passion. The reward system. Who gets what as an individual reward? How to make the reward having lasting significance? How to recognize individual performance? So, letters of commendation, public recognition for outstanding work, desirable job assignments, increased personal flexibility. People love to be commendated, love to be rewarded. So recruitment, how do you get people on your team? You've got internal advertisement. Certainly we use external contractors, we use recruitment agencies, we use often a process of formal interview, reference checking. We have a contract with a 3 or 6 month probation period. We can fire the employee for any reason whatsoever during that probation period, as enforced by the contract. So it requires a lot of skill to be able to recruit well, but the more compelling the project, the more likely you are you're going to get good candidates, and the better your reputation as a project manager as well. So it's a self-fulfilling virtuous cycle. So lots of recruitment issues. Sometimes those who have a high problem-solving ability will get bored. Simply get bored with straightforward work. Sometimes the best people, especially contractors, are overcommitted. Sometimes too much knowledge can indicate an academic inclination. Basically, if you want to halve your salary in the IT industry, get a PhD. Credibility, winners on the team leads to certainly confidence, and they often have very good political connections, and ambition, initiative, energy can often make up for the shortcomings. So, as we've seen, as I've talked about earlier, we get conflict. I talked to you about my little conflict earlier that could have ended up in a legal dispute. So be it. I didn't tell you, but I said, oh, yeah, do nothing, it's a good idea. We can always settle outside the court. I can always settle if I want. I can always concede, can't I? Here, but not conceding now puts me still in a position of strength because I'm giving risk to the other side. So we've got this storming phase during the team formation. You've got to integrate lots of disciplines across functional lines. They have to adapt to a changing environment. People hate change. And you might suffer rejection, the same problem that a heart transplant suffers. Heart transplant patient suffers, that the body rejects the heart transplant. They need anti-rejection drugs here. So what do you think people have conflict over? Status? So the quality of the... Let's write it down. It's interesting. What sort of things do you think people fight about in a project? What are the areas of conflict? So you said quality, that some members want good quality and the project manager doesn't? The project manager wants good quality and the team members don't. Good enough. Sure. So quality, yeah.
Ego conflicts, status quo.
Sorry, what sort of conflict?
Ego.
Oh, ego. Yeah, ego. Yeah, that's true. So ego, and that related to some personalities, yes? That you don't like certain people, yeah? For whatever reason. Very good. So scheduling could be the schedule is too tight. The workload is too high. What else?
Dependency on other team members.
Yeah. Dependencies. Wait, you're going to find that one in your group assignment, aren't you? Having to rely on other people, having to put up with their egos. Yeah, quality, that's good enough. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I need it by next week. No, I'll do it the day before the assignment's due. Yeah, you're giving me the hardest bit to do. I've got more higher work than you do. Yeah, it's true. All of these things in your group assignment even. What else? Anything else?
Seniority.
Yeah, who's the boss? Seniority. Less so a problem in corporations because it's very explicit on the organizational diagram who's senior and who isn't.
Span of control, who own what asset. Like some people don't want their asset to be messed with, or that's shared with the whole.
Yeah, some people are very precious about ownership. All right, call it ownership. Should be shared ownership. Everybody can improve, refactor a code, but somebody say, don't you dare touch it. That's true.
Say lack of faith in the outcome.
Culture.
No. Unclear vision. If you have faith in the outcome, you have a clear vision. So this is an unclear vision or purpose. Anything else?
Equality.
Quality?
Equality. Whether everyone is treated equally.
Yeah, okay. Equality. Very good. Lots of things to fight about, isn't there?
Coordination. Coordination.
Quality.
Coordination.
Coordination. Yeah, who does what? Workload. And who does what? They're related. You know, what do you mean I don't like your attitude? That's personality too. Poor communication. Will we fight about that? We're communicating very well if we're fighting.
Well, sometimes when you think, like, you kind of expect people communication when they have others.
Yeah, poor communication. They're not telling you, you're not talking to you. Yeah, that's true. Lots of things we're finding, aren't we? What a good list. So, lots of reason for conflict. Some dated studies, but what the literature tells us. So, the priorities of the project, the administration procedures, the technical options, the manpower, the resources, the cost, is the budget sufficient, the schedule, and personality, interpersonal, ego-centered. We've got a similar list. And then the literature shows that the intensity over the cycle here in defining the project, the priorities, and the procedures is high conflict. During the planning, it's the schedule, the priorities. In executing, schedule, priorities, technical, and in delivering. So interpersonal, not that much. People have learned to grow up and to put up with different personalities. In other words, I don't quite like you, but I know I have to work with you, so all right. So, not so much personality here. Schedule. Schedule's a very big one. Schedules are just too tight. That's why you need an agile methodology. It's the only way to treat schedule risk. Big design up front, waterfall approach, failure at the end. Time waits for no man. You can never get the time back. Unless it's a Harry Potter movie and Hermione's got a time spell and she can go back in time. But unless you're J.K. Rowling in one of her stories, you can't go back in time. So agile is the only way to treat schedule risk. Because you start building something and delivering early. To find it's not suitable, to iterate, to find it's not feasible and stop the project, or to iterate and build on a platform, as the government is doing with My Health Record. It was the only solution, to build it iteratively, to build it incrementally. And Malcolm Turnbull used to talk about agile quite a lot. In this context of an incremental delivery and development. So, these two guys, Thomas and Kilman, discussed 5 conflict resolution modes. How to avoid all these conflicts. How to resolve these conflicts. And so some are more assertive and some are more cooperative here. So we can withdraw, we can retreat from the disagreement. We can smoothen. We can go, look, I see we disagree, you can have it your way. Smoothing. What we agree with. You can compromise. We'll split in the middle, half-half. You can force. It's my way or the highway. You can confront. Let's sit down, let's debate the issues, and let's sort it out. So I want everybody to choose one preferred style that you like, that you think is a good style, and vote for it. Yes? Has everybody chosen one? So now I want you to put your hand up. Everybody must vote. Be in big trouble if you don't vote. Everybody must vote. So by raising your hand, I want you to vote for your preferred method. So who likes withdrawal? Not very popular. Who likes smoothing? Yeah, a few of you. Don't sweat the small stuff. Why do you want to do that? Who likes compromising? A lot of you like compromising. Who likes forcing? Yeah. Hold on. And who likes confrontation? Yeah, so we're quite split, aren't we? What do you think's the answer? Yes, that's the answer. That all the methods have their role. When I had a Macquarie Street lawyer ring me up and say that the lease needs a variation, a mistake was made, you're being unethical, immoral, here we need to fix the problem, and if you don't fix it, we'll take you to court and we'll cancel your option. Am I going to argue the law off cuff with a Macquarie Street lawyer? I said, I'm not talking to you any further. I have to withdraw. There is no urgency to accede to his request, to give him any information, to tell him my position, other than I started to say, we don't like the spot. We're not. Oh, he's not listening. He just wants to ram this down my throat. Withdraw. There are times when emotions are high, when you don't have enough information, when you need to rally support. And I'm sorry, I can't talk about it now. Can we make a time? Next week? Tomorrow? Sorry, and walk out. You have to withdraw. Because you don't have enough information, you're overpowered, and you don't want to concede, that's how you deal with a bully, someone trying to bully you. No, I can't discuss it now. Why not? I can't even tell you that. I can only tell you I will not discuss it. Walk out. And then rally your troops. Rally your opposition. Smoothing. Sometimes you have to preserve the relationship. And why are you fighting over very small things? So find out, get the overall deal. A lot of you chose compromise. You know, compromise is usually a lose-lose. As an example, what's the definition of a camel? What's a camel? It's an animal? Yeah. What sort of animal is it? Yeah. It's found in the desert, has one or two arms. They can be have quite a temper, yeah. Camels. Anyway, another definition of a camel is a horse designed by a committee. Could well be, but that's what you end up when you tell a committee to design a horse. You might end up with a camel. So compromise. Do you think Elon Musk compromises? With SpaceX, with his boring company, with Tesla, with the batteries, with the cars. He didn't compromise. Steve Jobs, did he compromise? No. Samsung? Yes. All the time. A low-end phone, a mid-range phone, a high-end phone. It's a mess. It's a mess of every stake being something for everybody all the time. And they're a very big, successful company, largely. But it's a different philosophy. So compromise. And what did I do with my parking spot? I compromised. I'm paying half from next month. I can sublease. Why? Why did I compromise? Is because no agreement could be financially worse off. I'm treating the risk that legal action goes against me. The plaintiff's argument is that the pre-lease negotiation covered the spot, covered the cost, and this is a simple error in what was already agreed. We're all human, we make mistakes. I could easily lose.
So the lawyer can take the cut or something.
That would be so nice, but that's not how the world works. I compromised to treat the risk, two risks. I treated two risks. Risk number one of losing and costing a lot more. And risk number two, ending in a dispute with the lessor when I need his help in the future. I want to sell the business, for instance. He has to agree. But now I know too, if he doesn't agree, I'll take him to court. He's terrified of court. Especially me, because I'll represent myself, because I'm very articulate. Had you noticed? Very opinionated, very articulate. I represent myself. It means I don't care about the cost. Cost to me is just a hobby. Is entertainment for me, entertainment value. You see how I project that image here. So sometimes, yes, you have. I compromised, and I compromised to treat risks, reduce risk, and to get rid of it too. Here, it seemed to be the best idea at the time. So just 5 minutes before this lecture started, I compromised. Force, absolutely. You'll get to a country road. You'll be driving in the country, and there'll be a T intersection. And my wife will say, I think we should turn left, and I'll turn right. I'm looking at the GPS. I'm reading the sign. She says, no, I think we're going the wrong way. I think we're going the right way. I'm tired. I want to get there. And I know I'm right. There's no value in compromising. We'll just sit at the T intersection and do nothing. Because you can't go left or right. You've got to go make a decision, right? It's no good accommodating. Yes, honey, we'll go in the direction you think, if you know you're right.
That's where distraction comes in, and you pull over to the side, break out the picnic basket, and have tea.
Oh, I know. That's the smoothing approach. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about the various options here. We could go left or we could go right. Or we could just stay here. So it's all on the table. That's right. And so maybe that's more the confrontation approach. The confrontation approach, not the smoothing. Confrontation approach is, well, we try and work it out. And why do you feel that left is the right direction? What are your feelings about that? Yeah, so if I know I'm right, I just do it, and I cop the flack, and that's okay, and everything's good, because I know I'm right. It's fine. Here, so there are occasions where you should force, it's the right way. Confrontation is the best method, where you seek to work it out, but then you have to have an alignment of objectives between the two parties. Both are interested in finding the best solution. And there you have a learning situation. You can learn. And so we're doing this review of ITIC 871. I hope that will be a confrontation approach where, as I'm assembling all my material and everything, all my evidence, all my data, information, to say, well, this is the to support my opinion of the direction in which it could go. But I'm quite happy to listen to the other participants in the meeting, and they could well come up with some very good ideas themselves. And in fact, next semester, I'm sharing it with Stephen. So I insisted that Stephen be in the meeting. And when Stephen says we should do this, 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 and this, I'll say to Stephen, yeah, that can be in your section. No problem. You do that. See? We'll work it out. I'm not trying to force. I'm not trying to force my view on everybody in that meeting, because it's very subjective, what should be included and excluded here, and I don't have the power. I have no authority, very little authority. So I will try a confrontation. If that fails, I'll look for compromise, and if that fails, okay, whatever you want. I agree. And then I'll go and teach whatever I want anyway afterwards. You can always win indirectly later. You can always concede and then pull back a victory later. So you can even blend the styles in. So I will blend the styles. I'll start with confrontation. Then I'll want to compromise if I can't get that. I'll do what I want in my bit. You do what you want in your bit. That's a compromise. And if that fails, I go, whatever you want, boss. That's okay. And then I'll end up teaching whatever I want anyway. Doing it my way anyway. And then boss will say, but we agreed on something else. Did we? I'm confused. Is there anything wrong with what I'm doing? Really? Oh, I'm sorry. Beg for forgiveness. Beg for forgiveness is much easier than asking for getting permission. So how should we do it next time? Oh, okay. And then again, do it the way you want. But that's how we did it last year. I'm confused. That's what we did last year. I thought that's what we're doing this year. So you still end up doing what you want. So you blend. You can blend the methods, right? So, as you rightly said, it's a style to situation match. The mode depends on the circumstances, no rules. So collaborating, when you and the conflicting party can both get at least what you wanted and maybe more. It reduces cost, you fight a common power base, attack a common foe, but you need time. There needs to be trust, confidence, and the ultimate objective is to learn. So that's the best method. But compromise, often it's the end result. When you cannot win, you see, that'll be my fallback position because I have no authority. When others are as strong as you are, when you do not have the time to win, you maintain your relationship, the car park thing. I didn't have the authority, I didn't have the strength to dictate. It's two parties here. You maintain the relationship. When the magistrate might go against me, I may not be right legally. When the Macquarie Street solicitor certainly thought he was right. To avoid giving the impression of fighting, you see? Is it a win-win? Sometimes it's a lose-lose. The camel. You end up with a camel. So smoothing. We've agreed on 3 out of 5 points. No reason why we can't agree on the other 2. We reach a goal. We create an obligation for a trade-off a later date. I agreed to you. Later I expect you to agree to me. Stakes are low. We don't care. Well, don't sweat the small stuff. It maintains harmony when any solution will do. It creates goodwill, to be magnanimous, to concede, when you'll lose anyway, to gain time. Is it valid for handling sometimes with the boss? You have to smoothen. Yeah, boss? Okay, boss. Go off and do whatever you want anyway afterwards. Because boss doesn't want to see somebody opposing them. You have to smoothen. He will. I just told you. Oh, I'm confused. Isn't that what we agreed? Yeah, I remember. We talked about this, didn't we? Yeah, and I said not to do it that. Really? Is that what you said? But hold on, this is working. Can I show you my results? Can I show you the student feedback? Can we discuss this further? Oh, forget it. That's what the boss is going to go. Forget it. He's lost. You've already done it your way. You've already proven it works. He knows he's wrong. It's easier to beg for forgiveness than to get permission. You will find this. Forcing, of course. When you're right. When it's do or die. I want to get there already. I don't want to take the wrong way. Right. Here, when the stakes are high, when you're stronger, never start a battle that you cannot win. You have to be stronger if you're going to force. Here in the short term, one shot maybe. When the relationship's unimportant, a quick decision must be made. There is a role for forcing. Avoiding. It's seen as cowardice, but when you can't win, or the stakes are low, or gain time, it get unnerved. I didn't want to give the solicitor anything other than I don't want to talk. I said to him, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to continue this discussion. Goodbye. That's it. Preserve neutrality of reputation when you think the problem will go away, or when you win by delay. So, withdrawal is appropriate too. So finally, we've been on this project for quite some time. We've got to rejuvenate the team. We can institute some new rituals in terms of how we celebrate, how we establish a new iteration. Just mix things up a bit. As a team, take an off-site break from the project. Have an inspirational message or movie or a speaker. A pep talk is a good idea. In other words, get people away from the problem. Step back. Take a step back and see what we have achieved and what needs to be done again. So lots of techniques. There's team building sessions with an outsider, outside activity, team games, survival courses and things have been used to rejuvenate teams because they get stale. There's pitfalls in teams. There's groupthink. This is agreeing too much to the boss. The Donald Trump presidency is one of groupthink, that Trump is very narrow-minded, very egotistical. Anybody who disagrees with him gets fired, and I think, in my opinion, it's a disastrous presidency. And he encourages groupthink, that anything he doesn't like is fake news, basically. So groupthink is this tendency to always agree, especially with the boss, but agree with each other and never have a dissenting view. NASA was accused of groupthink, and it destroyed 2 of the space shuttles. So there was Challenger. And one of the contractors, you see, to assemble a space shuttle takes an army of contractors, in fact. One of the contractors said to NASA that they were planning a launch in winter. It was Florida, but it was very cold. And they told NASA that it could be the O-rings, separating these rubber O-rings, separating these fuel tanks, could freeze and become brittle in the low temperature. And NASA said, no, we've had many missions with these parameters. It won't be a problem. We've been doing this very successfully. And Challenger blew up 11 seconds into launch because of leakage in the fuel tanks, because the seals failed, because they were frozen. And they refused to listen to the contractor. Space shuttles went up and down. About a decade later, we had Challenger. What happened there again? The cold. The foam freezes on the fuel tanks, and that's because of evaporation within the tank, and that creates a cooling effect when gases evaporate. So how a refrigerator works. It's the expansion of gas, and then the compressor compresses the gas, liquefies the gas again, and then it expands again, and as it expands, it cools. Anyway, you've got expansion of gas in these fuel tanks, and the foam gets frozen. And when Challenger took off, there was a foam strike on the leading edge of one of the wings. And again, there were lots of groups within NASA that said this foam strike could have damaged the heat shielding tiles on the wing. And what we need to do is divert military satellites to take a picture take some pictures, high-resolution pictures of this wing, and see whether there's any damage. And if it's been damaged, it needs to be repaired up there before Challenger comes down. And again, NASA, the management of NASA, overruled the groups that were saying we might have a problem here, saying we've had foam strikes before, we've been doing this for so long, this is not a problem. And sure enough, all the aircraft and all crew were destroyed on re-entry to Earth as the craft blew up because of failure of the heat shielding tiles damaged by the foam strike. So groupthink. Groupthink is, again, or we could say the same thing with Boeing. How incredibly arrogant and stupid. Boeing doesn't want to have 737 pilots retrained on the 8 MAX because that's a lot of cost to airlines. So introduced the 8 MAX has got the bigger engines. The bigger engines have the propensity to push the nose down. So, to push the nose up. And if the nose gets up, then the engines will stall because it's too difficult. So they develop some software that automatically points the nose down if a sensor detects that the nose is being pushed up and the plane is at risk of being stalled. So all it took was a faulty air sensor on both the Lion Air aircraft and the Ethiopian airline aircraft, and 2 planes were flown by the software straight around. The data, the satellite data now is confirming that that's the problem and the two are related. But again, groupthink. When the first Lion Air occurred and the feedback was that the crew were wrestling with the plane trying to get the nose up about a dozen times, and there was a pilot who took a ride on one of the previous flights on that aircraft who saved them because he had seen it before and he knew how to manually override the system, and they didn't know how. And when Boeing knew all of this, they should have immediately grounded all of the 737 MAX to say pilots need retraining immediately. Until you've qualified in manual override, if you see this problem, this is the solution. Until you're qualified with training, and by the way, we're also working to change this software, which will need to retrain you again too, but we're working on a lot of fixes, but immediately retraining, that's what they should have done. But they didn't. It'll be all right. It's probably an isolated incident. They weren't acting on the facts. It was only until they were forced. Lie, that's it. That's right. But these are all symptoms of groupthink. It's deadly. We're Boeing. We've tested this. It's those imbecile Indonesians. They don't know how to fly our planes. Because Lion Air has a very poor safety record. They rationalized it away when the facts pointed to a very obvious problem they had created. So again, that may well be attributable to groupthink. This feeling of invincibility, that we are always right because we are who we are. You know, so that's very, very dangerous. You have to listen to your opponents, to those who are critical. Encourage the criticism. You don't have to agree with it. You have to listen to it and analyze it and see whether it's significant or not. And there's nothing more. That's when Stephen talks about the severity of risk on a scale of 1 to 5. That's the 5. That's the catastrophic risk. So you have to be very conscious of catastrophic risks. When they happen, it's a catastrophe. We've talked already that sometimes the team wants to bypass the bureaucracy, not adhere to the policies and procedures of the organization. They become a bit rogue. You can't permit it. Who's paying? Who's paying for this team? It's the organization. So there is a mandation, a responsibility. I have to abide by all the assessment rules of Macquarie University. So lots of complications with special consideration, with plagiarism. There's all sorts of policies and committees, etc., and I just stick to the rules. I have no choice. In fact, my opinion is that it makes my life easier. I don't have to make any hard choices, and it's a legalistic. We're in a legal environment here. I don't have to worry about the legalities of my decision making, because when I mark your work, I'll substantiate the marks I gave you. Don't come on. Complain. You'll see what happens when you complain. Unless I've made a mistake, I will substantiate easily how I've marked it. But in terms of whether you need special consideration, etc., I adhere to the bureaucracy. I don't try and bypass. This is not what I'm paid to do. That's irresponsible. You have a duty to the organization to whom you work. All you can do is, if they create a cognitive dissonance, if what the organization wants you to do and what you feel is right are two different things, we call that a dissonance. If that occurs, your only choice is to resign. But whilst you work for the organization, there are the policies and procedures you need to follow. Going native is where the group goes off and wants to steal the project and create their own startup, where they're more interested in the client than in the organization who's paying them. And it can also be, sometimes team spirit becomes team infatuation. That's very good for while the project runs, but when the project ends, people are devastated. Oh, life's coming to an end now. This project has been delivered, is finished. So these are pitfalls. But the groupthink is the worst one. Oh, no, you have to sit here for another 5 minutes. I have to deliver until... I did work, I've got 5 minutes. I did work for a college in the city, and the material was very superficial. It was really not very good. And I would whiz through it pretty quickly. And a student complained that I finished the class early. And the principal wrote me an email and said, I've heard a complaint that you finish early, Ian.